afternoon. This is Dave Van Hoy, and I am here with Mike Bott, Principal Systems Engineer from Qumulo Systems. And we are looking at things that would have happened for NAB this year as our first question. But before we start, Mike, tell us about your background in media and entertainment.
So I've been in storage and media and entertainment for about 25 years. My whole career has been very focused on storage, very focused on media, particularly high performance, both for render and editorial and color. And I've worked in many different system disciplines, anywhere from software development to professional services to actual systems administration. And now I'm more of a pre-sales systems architect.
Excellent. So obviously we didn't have NAB this year. And I would imagine that Qumulo, like many vendors, had a plan. And tell us about what Qumulo had planned for NAB.
We did. We had a plan for a big booth and making a lot of noise. I've distilled it down to about 4 things that we would have been really focused on showing everybody at NAB. So the first of those is something we call the P368P. That is a new product. It is in our P series, which is our all NVMe line of nodes. So it's blazing fast performance. It's targeted directly at a bunch of those workflows that were traditionally the domain of shared SAN, because that was the only thing that could achieve those kinds of bandwidths. Well, as network attached storage has grown up and as Ethernet has really increased bandwidth, it's become more and more possible to do more and more of those high-speed workflows on scale-out NAS, as opposed to building a big complex shared SAN. So this is a new entry using very high-density drives. The idea is that we provide 368 terabytes in a 2 RU node. So that's raw. So that dramatically raises, it's big. It dramatically raises the total capacity that we can put in a single cluster. So if you go to our max size today, which is 100 nodes, and you just fill about, it'd be 5 racks, you're talking 30 petabytes of NVMe in the same file system and namespace. And it's hundreds of gigabytes per second of aggregate throughput once you build that large.
Wow. I'm assuming that's on a 100 gig backbone?
Correct. Yeah, actually, we have dual 100 gig facing the clients and dual 100 gig facing the other nodes. So quad 100 gig on each of those nodes. Very future-proof.
And what else would have been at NAB?
So we've been working on growing our reference customer base. So we have across a bunch of post-production houses, editorial, VFX shops. We've got a growing list of those customers, such as ONET. There's Rodeo VFX, Fuse FX, Mars, that's MARZ, Alter Ego, Sight and Sound, Guru, one I'm particularly proud of, Madison Square Garden Networks, Falcons Creative, and Atomic Fiction. So all of them good names, huh? They'll all take a call. They're all ecstatic about Qumulo. They love the support. They love the capabilities of the product, and it's very integrated in their workflows.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah, the next thing we were going to talk about a lot, we've had an alliances team that's been pretty busy working on partnerships with a bunch of the ecosystem partners that are out there that kind of surround our environments in media. And so there's a few of those out there. I mean, there's an Adobe partnership, really focused actually on cloud, both editorial and other post-production media encoding. We have partnered with Axle AI, and that's real-time artificially intelligent assigning of metadata to stuff it finds in the file system. We have a partnership that we are announcing with Gray Meta, and that's more about simplifying content workflows. We're trying to get to true and accurate playback, more collaboration. It's another approach to intelligent metadata. And then in terms of moving bits and blocks around, we are working with Signiant on some accelerated file transfer across the globe. As a workflow manager, we're also working on integrating with them to automate things that happen on the file system as part of a workflow. And then finally with Atto, and that's mostly about optimizing Ethernet networks for video workflows, particularly editorial, uncompressed, but as well as camera raw. We see quite a few Atto adapters out there in our ecosystems. Those
are pretty revolutionary things. And especially the the large aggregate bandwidth within a clustered NAS. Is that a unique feature? Can anybody else do that, Mike?
There are a few clustered scale-out NAS available out there. We are probably the most modern. A lot of them were developed last decade or the decade before. So they're older code bases that couldn't take into account a bunch of things that happened in the last decade and a half, like cloud or flash or virtualization. So all of those are things that we can really take advantage of when comparing with some of the legacy scale-out offerings out there.
That's tremendous. Qumulo has definitely been at the forefront for some time, and from its file system forward, which is definitely unique and modern. So our other question we wanted to ask vendors was, obviously we're in this time of a pandemic and a lot of different workflows and ways to get from here to there to continue to produce content. Is there anything that Qumulo has really put forward or accelerated as part of the reaction to this situation to help people with these workflows?
So I feel like we were a little bit ahead of this one, because at last year's NAB, that's NAB 2019, we were socializing and talking about the idea of something we call Cloud Studio. So Cloud Studio is a reference architecture. It involves a bunch of different vendors, Qumulo included. But the idea that you could, without a lot of workflow, without any actual workflow modification, you could pick up and shift the workload into the cloud using a Qumulo scale-out NAS and a high-powered GPU-enabled workstation, and deal with the artist interface using a virtual desktop technology like Teradici, who we work with quite a bit. And so we had been talking about that for so long, and we'd been socializing that all year after NAB, talking to all customers about it. And so you can imagine that when lockdown started, we started getting a lot of phone calls. Hey, that thing you were talking to us about last year, we'd like to do that like this week. Yeah. So we started helping a lot of people move their workloads into the cloud. And we have an implementation both in AWS and GCP. It's exactly the same software stack that is running on premises. So it's very easy, if you're used to administering a Qumulo cluster, to fire one up in the cloud using standard tools, Terraform or CloudFormation. It's infrastructure as code things. So same storage management layer, same protocol support, but you provision the thing with the script. And so it's enabled people to very quickly shift workloads into the cloud. And in fact, we have one customer who's a major broadcaster. I can talk about the use case. I can't mention the name specifically. But a major broadcaster kind of took this and ran with it last year. And by the end of last year, they had shifted a good portion of their editorial into a cloud editorial on-demand system. And all of the editors were running off of Zero clients. And wow. So they already had all this running. So when lockdown started, all they had to do is tell everybody, hey, take your Zero clients home and keep working. And so they were so far ahead of it, like the editors would call up and say, hey, this is awesome that I can edit in the cloud. And the guys that ran the system really didn't have the heart to tell them that they'd been editing in the cloud for several months already.
Doesn't get much better than that, does it?
No, that was there was some good, foresight there, understanding that was an efficient way to provision temporary editorial capacity, and they built it out just ahead of a time when it was really needed.
That's tremendous. Certainly super helpful, and certainly I'm sure saved a lot of people's situations. That's awesome.
Definitely.
And tremendous.
Keeps the content flowing.
Is there anything else that that is related to work from home or cloud workflows that the audience should be aware of?
You have some options, I think, when it comes to trying to get your artists out of a facility working from home. And you got to consider the relative costs of the approaches against each other. You can have a bunch of guys on their own workstations running over their internet connection, pulling and pushing files. That's probably the least expensive, but it's also going to be the least like your on-prem workflow. Whereas the contrast is in the VDI-enabled workflow, whether using Teradici or HP, RGS, I think is what it's called. They any of those remote desktop technologies will get you a better experience. because you're going to be able to centralize the actual workstations close to the storage, but the editor can be many milliseconds away as the internet packet flies. So but it's more expensive to do it that way because you're paying for high-end workstations in the cloud. So you kind of got to consider the relative costs and how long you're running, how long you're going to be running your project for when you're making those determinations.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Mike. You've been generous with your time. It's great to see this exciting progress from Qumulo, and I'm sure our clients and the users out there are going to appreciate it and use it very much.
Well, thank you, Dave. I appreciate the time as well. Always good talking to you.
You too, Mike. Thanks.